Recently, YouTube recommended a Mirage build to me. This was the so-called AFK Mirage build for raiding. The build was uploaded by a user named ProtGW2. Give the guy some support by checking out the original video as well, but I was somewhat skeptical and ready for memes when I watched the video. The description states that you can just summon illusions and then you can tab out to Netflix. Sounds like a build for me. Let's discover how the build works and if it's actually good. It sounds like a good beginner build. Oh, and please don't really go AFK while raiding, it's just not a great idea. It's me, Kyo, and let's head into the video. For the AFK Mirage, you literally do as little as possible to do damage. The build uses Viper stats. The Viper stat improves your condition damage and expertise. This means that the build relies on damage over time. The expertise increases the durations of conditions you apply. Condition-based builds are really good in endgame content. However, it does not perform well against bosses that phase a lot. This means if a boss becomes invulnerable and it goes into its next phase. When this occurs, all conditions on a boss will be lost, and conditions take time to ramp up in damage. That means that it takes a few seconds before a condition-based build is actually doing a good amount of damage. But to be fair, I've tried this on bosses that phase a lot. For example, Sabatha in Wing 1, and it works just fine. Let me go over the gear first. In the video, Mr. Prot used Viper stats on his armor. He uses this on his weapons and trinkets as well. But in addition to that, he also has agony infusions from fractals. This is great, but it is a bit out of reach for your average player. We won't be using these in the video. Nightmare runes are the best fit for this build, but can be tedious to acquire. If you have them, use them for this build. Else, you can use superior runes of the crate. Runes of the crate increase the duration of bleeding you apply and enhance your condition damage. I did a good amount of damage with those, but they are relatively expensive. But I also want to stick as close to the original build as possible, so I finally went with 5 runes of the Trapper and 1 superior rune of the Afflicted. The runes of the Trapper can be easily crafted, and the rune of the Afflicted is extremely cheap on the trading post. For the weapons, I'll be using an axe and a torch. It doesn't really matter what you use in your offhand, you can take a pistol if you want, as long as your main hand weapon is an axe. On the axe, we use a superior Sigil of Earth, which applies bleeding when we land a critical hit. And for the torch, we use a superior Sigil of Torment, which applies torment if we land a critical hit. And now, let's go over the traits. We use the Dueling, Chaos and the Mirage trait lines. In Dueling, we start off with Decoy. Decoy summons a clone when we get below 50%. This is more of a defensive trait, and it won't happen too often if all goes well. The next trait in this trait line is Sharper Images. Sharper Images applies bleeding on a critical hit. That's pretty nice because we'll be critting quite a lot. Evasive Mirror is also a defensive trait. When we dodge, or well, when we use Mirage Cloak, we'll gain a 2-second barrier that blocks projectiles. The Grandmaster trait for this build is Superiority Complex. This passively increases our critical hit damage. When a foe is disabled or below 50% health, we'll do even more damage. The first trait we choose in the Chaos trait line is Master of Manipulation. This reduces the recharge of manipulations and grants super speed to allies if they are affected by a manipulation. This build uses Mirror and Illusion of Life as their manipulations. Chaotic Potency is used to enhance our condition damage. The other 2 traits here are defensive, and that's not something we really need if we have a better DPS option. Prismatic Understanding gives us boons when we enter stealth. You won't really enter stealth, so it doesn't really matter which Grandmaster trait you choose. However, I use a torch for this build, and this combos nicely with the Prestige. This skill gives me stealth, and thus also gives me boons. The last trait line is the Mirage. The first trait we choose is Self-Deception. This gives us a clone whenever we use a deception. The build just uses a single deception though, and this is your elite skill, Jaunt. You can use this skill to dodge and reposition yourself, but now it also summons another clone. Mirrored Axis is used to summon another axe while auto-attacking. This enhances our auto-attack damage and inflicts torment to enemies. Elusive Mind is another defensive trait. We don't really have any options here to enhance our DPS, so this makes sense. This trait removes 3 conditions while we dodge, or well, when we use Mirage Cloak really. It works really well to stay alive if your healer is not curing your conditions. This should give you a general idea of the traits and why we use them. Make sure to read all of your traits before you start using this build, or any build for that matter. Let's have a look at your weapons and your skills. Of course, we are going to use an axe. We'll only be using skill 1 for this build because else it wouldn't be an AFK build. But when you start a fight, you want to use skill 2 to summon a clone first. As an offhand weapon, I'm using a torch. You can take any weapon for that matter. We won't really be using its skills anyway. I picked the torch because I can use it with the prestige, skill 4. This briefly stealths us and applies boons when we enter stealth. As explained before, the prismatic understanding trait gives us these boons when we enter stealth. Mirror is our manipulation healing skill. This gives us super speed when we heal because of the master of manipulation trait, and its cooldown is reduced by the same trait as well. Illusion of life is another manipulation that benefits from the master of manipulation trait. We can revive downed allies with this skill. The skill has a long range, and that's really nice when an ally gets downed outside of your stack. When you revive them, they will also gain super speed, and this allows them to quickly get back into position. Signet of Midnight passively increases your expertise, and expertise increases the duration of the conditions we apply. You don't have to use this skill, just leave it there. The same goes for the Signet of Domination. This passively increases our condition damage. Same as before, don't use it. Our elite skill is Jaunt. Since we can't dodge as a Mirage, we need some mobility. Jaunt is great for that because it allows us to teleport a short distance. Also, Self-Deception summons another clone when we use Jaunt. There, those are the skills and traits for the AFK Mirage. Before we go into some examples, let's look at your rotation. Yes, your rotation. First, we use skill 2, Lingering Thoughts, to summon a clone. Then we use Jaunt to summon another clone. Use skill 2 another time until you have 3 clones. Then make sure your skill 1 is on auto attack. There, that's it. After the golem is defeated, you should have done about 24k DPS. As said before, if you are in a fight and an ally goes down, make sure to use Illusion of Life to get them back up. Now let's see how this works in a real raid. Don't expect high DPS numbers here, just average should be fine. The first group I joined was a 200 ally group for the Veil Guardian. Of course, for the Veil Guardian we need some condition damage for the red split at 66 and 33%. So this build is a nice fit. Of course, we are using the AFK rotation for this, but we never really go AFK and we don't ignore mechanics as well. If the situation gets dire and I have to diverge from my rotation, I will do so. As you can see on the DPS meter, the DPS for the Mirage starts slow. It takes time to ramp up the conditions, but we see a slow increase in DPS. At 66% we go to the Red Guardian and get it down. Once we get back into position, I repeat the same rotation. We're just auto attacking or pressing 1. Occasionally you'll see me using skill 2 or Jaunt to resummon a clone. At around 20% health, we see that my DPS is at a solid 3rd or 4th spot. This is not too bad considering that the bottom 3 or 4 players are supporting and are not dealing that much DPS. Also, here we see Illusion of Life do its thing. I rezzed a player outside the stack. Sadly, he immediately died because we skipped the green circle mechanic. At the end of the fight, I ended on a 4th spot with just 800 DPS difference with the number 1. That isn't too bad. I've stuck to the Mirage and did Gorzaval as well. Keep in mind that Gorzaval is a stationary boss, he does not move around that much, and therefore the torment we inflict should do more damage. However, Gorzaval phases a few times throughout the fight. Here we have to resummon or retarget our clones on the charged souls. This is a loss in DPS, but this is a loss in DPS for most people. At around 25% I had the lowest DPS. I had to restack my conditions and clones to get my DPS back up again. Luckily, Gorzaval does not phase anymore at this stage and my conditions will stay on him. I quickly went up the DPS meter as the fight went on. In the end, I ended up at a 3rd spot with about 16k DPS. This is mediocre, but it was somewhat comparable to the DPS of other players. With another group I tried Matthias in Wing 2. This fight yielded similar results to the other encounters I've had. I've ended up in the top 3 DPS. However, the DPS between me and the other players was significant. Also, I wasn't able to stay in a stationary position during this encounter. I had to use Jaunt a lot to reposition myself. I tried this build on other raid bosses as well, but the results were similar. So, all in all, this is definitely a good result. By just letting my character auto attack, I can do enough damage to be of importance. I'd say give this build a shot. If you still have any questions, leave them in the comments. Don't forget to give this video a like, share and subscribe to support the channel. Thanks for watching and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Peace!